here. It's 9:02, so let's get started officially. Welcome, Laura. Thank you
Thanks.
for coming today.
Absolutely.
Yes, this is awesome. So we always kind of start with just telling us a little bit about what you did before photography, real estate, how long you've been in real estate, and what got you into the business.
Okay, I was going to say I've never been into photography.
Yeah, I'm so confused.
So what I did before real estate is I lived out of the area. I had done a lot of retail management. I did dental practice management,
Okay.
Things like that. And I grew up in Ohio, got married, moved to Chicago for my husband at the time's schooling. And then we came to Rochester for him to finish his fellowship and so forth. And it was my turn to either go back to school, do what I wanted to do, that sort of thing. And the job market is different here than it was in Chicago for what I had been doing. So I happened to have looked at the want ads in the newspaper, because it was that long ago. And there was a career seminar for a different company. Keller Williams didn't exist in Rochester at the time. And I went to it, and it was a breakfast on a Saturday morning, and I was completely inspired.
Okay.
And I left there, never thought I would have a commission-only job, and I was not a big risk taker at the time. And I left there, called my husband, and said, I think I really want to do this. So he was very supportive, and I gave myself 6 months to make it work or not work. And that was 15 years ago. So
okay.
It works.
Well, that's exciting. That's exciting.
Yeah.
So obviously you started at a different company.
I did. Yeah.
Yes. Have you only been to one company other than Keller, or have you gone to a couple? Okay.
Yes. So I started at Coldwell Banker. The Coldwell Banker that we all know today in Rochester was not in existence at the time. The Coldwell Banker that I started in dissolved at a point in time after I left, and not because I left, but just after I left.
You left, and it all fell apart.
Yeah. And so they had a real strong, I was very lucky that I had gone to that particular career seminar, because I had no idea anything about real estate. I hadn't ever owned a home. I just knew nothing. I thought you had to go to college to get a degree in whatever. And luckily, because they were offering free training, I thought that was my only option, because it said free.
Right.
And coming from where we were coming from, and that the new start for us, it was like I didn't have the funds to be able to invest in something. So I was super grateful to be there, because they had this standard of expectation of getting the agents that were aligned with them into production quickly.
Okay, that's great. So how long were you with that company?
I was with them, I think, around 3 years is when was when Keller Williams came to town. And as soon as they came to town, I switched over. I had been familiar with the business model, because being someone who values education highly, I was going to conferences around the country with my old company, and I frequently was the only one that would go to these conferences and so forth. And I had met a lot of Keller Williams representatives throughout my travels, and I just thought, oh my gosh, I would love to work with Keller Williams if I had the opportunity.
Okay. So you were like just waiting. You were like waiting for them to come to town so you could jump ship and come that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's exciting. I don't know that I knew that you were among the first crew that started with Keller Williams. Was there a big growth curve there, starting with a brand new company?
Yes. Yeah, there was. And it was really cool at the time, because there was this energy and this excitement and this fear. Is this going to work? And are we going to be able to do what other Keller Williams offices have been able to do around the country? And there was just all this hope and excitement and passion, and it was definitely an all hands on deck, and we were all there for a common goal. Not only our respective businesses and so forth. It was really, really cool to have gone through experience.
Okay. So it kind of delivered on the promise that you were waiting for, which is really great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. How did you find Keller? And this is not in any way bashing up any other agency, but how was Keller Williams different from where you came from? Like, what were the big differences?
So I came from a traditional brokerage business model, and the alignment that I had with Keller Williams and still have is that everyone matters at Keller Williams. It's not just the people that are big producers. Everyone matters. Everybody contributes in some form or fashion to the success of the overall company. And because we were a profit sharing company, the company itself was mindful of things to ensure that it was for the greater good. I'm a greater good kind of person, and the profit sharing system ensures that there is a checks and balances, and it's not just about the owner of the company's pocketbook.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So let's rewind back a little bit to when you first started back with your other brokerage. What were the first things that you did, like, to get your business up and running? I mean, you're not from here, so you were kind of like, that's harder, right? You didn't come with a
Yeah, it's a lot harder.
you know,
Yeah.
so tell us about the first couple of years on how you got your business up and running.
Yeah, it's a lot harder when you're not from here because you don't have anybody to call on to say that you're now in the business and you can help them. I mean, I had family, obviously, and friends, but they were all outside of the area, and it didn't make sense to them. Why would we call you in New York and so forth? So although I've been able to help a lot of my family remotely, it just wasn't going to be a supply of business that was sustainable. So at my former company, their main focus on getting agents into production quickly was prospecting based and marketing enhanced, but barely marketing enhanced. It was mostly prospecting, and they taught us the quickest ways to find business, and especially for those like myself who didn't have a network of people that had already known they were going into the business and were jumping at the chance to help them out. And that was through for sale by owners, expired listings. They taught me the hierarchy of prospecting. So there are clues of who's most likely to buy and sell that you can uncover. And I just call it the hierarchy. And I just went after the hierarchy. The challenge that I had was a complete mindset around a fear mindset around calling for sale by owners, that I did not like doing it. So I started with circle prospecting, or we called it at the time just listed, just sold, and I loved it. And so I literally built my business cold calling people, and I would take a listing, I would check with an agent in my office who had just listed something and asked if he or she were going to prospect around it, and the answer typically was no. And as long as they were comfortable with it, my company at the time had a system that I could just plug in a street, and the system would give me all the phone numbers for people that had not signed up for the do not call list. And I called every number on every list. And my first listings were from this circle prospecting.
Wow, that's amazing, because I was actually just looking at a chart the other day about kind of the hierarchy of like how many calls it takes. And circle prospecting was actually one of the ones where you have to make the most amount of calls to get sales, right? It's not the most efficient way to do it. There's certainly, though, it worked for you.
Yes,
so,
it did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that something that you still employ today?
I don't have to employ that as much anymore because now I have this larger book of business. And then, so now most of my business is repeat and referral.
Okay.
I was able to refine it more. There is an element that, you know, if we were in a different market, I would be doing that constantly to show the extra value, but also to just, you need to make more contacts in a different type of market. And not that I wouldn't do that in this market, it's just that you only have so much time if you're an individual agent, and you have to pick and choose what you're doing. And so I have focused my conversations on my database more.
Okay. So it sounds like you're saying that you just don't need it anymore, right? You've grown your business. There's a, businesses grow and they change. But if you were a new agent now, you still think that is something that is a
Oh,
skill.
it's fabulous. It's fabulous because you need to speak to so many people. I got my license in November, like right before Thanksgiving. And it doesn't matter really necessarily the time of year, except for the fact that at that time of year, there are fewer people that are having a conversation for an immediate need. So I was like hitting zeros a
Right,
lot. And what it did though for me is that it gave me a ton of practice on how to stay engaged in a conversation with someone, how to get them excited about the prospect of making a real estate move one way or another. And I found different ways to, your script that people give you has, 5 questions on it. Well, after they say no to all of those questions, well, then what do you do?
right.
Aside from getting off the phone, there are all kinds of ways to keep somebody engaged in that conversation. So I
Okay.
really learned that technique by circle prospecting versus for sale by owners or expireds, where the conversation is just very much more singular.
Okay. That's fantastic, actually, because, and I wonder if it could be a good class sometime to just kind of talk about the scripts of circle prospecting, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
answering the objections, and because you're calling somebody that by all measures isn't looking to buy or sell. They just happen to live near somebody who either just
Right.
bought or just sold, right? So,
Hmm.
I mean, there's no expectation that they should be. You're just kind of hoping that you find the person that's like, you know what? I was going to call somebody and I didn't know who to call, and now you're right in front of me, right?
Right. But then the statistics say that usually when one home goes up in a neighborhood,
Mhm.
one or two more come on pretty close to that. So depending on what's going on in that neighborhood, that home that just came on might be one of those one or two after somebody else went on the market. But
Okay.
if it's a brand new listing in a neighborhood that hasn't had a sale in a little while, the likelihood is there's going to be two more right away.
Okay. Well,
And,
that's a good
and
statistic to know. I don't think I knew that.
yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So did you then expand that into other forms of kind of going after business, non-business, like farming? Have you employed any of those or?
I did not employ farming. I love it in concept, but when I look at the return on investment and how long you have to contribute the front end financials for things that are a payoff much longer down the line, there are bigger returns on investment. So I have just constantly focused on the bigger return on investment. So from circle prospecting, I went into expireds
Okay,
and I went into unique property because that's what other agents couldn't do. They couldn't
right,
figure out how, and we were in a marketplace at the time of, and I didn't know this because I was so young in the business, but we were in a market that was shifting towards a buyer's market.
right,
And one of the worst or strongest, whichever way you want to look at it, strongest buyers markets we had ever seen. And we had to figure out, in my former company, there was such a focus on getting listings, which there is today still, obviously, and there is at Keller Williams as well. So I just was educated in that way. So when I came over to Keller Williams, I had 15 listings that I brought over because we were in a buyer's market.
right,
And
right,
everybody had a surplus of listings. But so then how do I get those properties sold? And
right,
so a lot of the ones that didn't sell were not only because there was a surplus of inventory, but also because they were really unique.
right.
And so most agents couldn't do that and find buyers for that. So I kind of took that on as a little niche for a while.
Okay. What did you consider a unique property? Like a farm or?
Yeah. So for example, I had a property that happened to be a for sale by owner for a period of time, was also an expired for twice. It had hired 2 different companies, and it was down in a really, really rural area, a town called Covington. Hopefully, maybe some of you have heard of it, but a town called Covington, about an hour away from Rochester, and it was down the street from a junkyard, and it was a very unique floor plan, and the floor plan was contributing to it not selling because people couldn't really feel it. And so ultimately the strategy that, and I had the same challenge in the very beginning of listing with them. Ultimately, I had asked them what inspired them to build it that way. And in his story of what inspired him to build it that way, that's how I started marketing it. And that's what was one of the stimuluses to get somebody to come and see the vision there, and forget about the fact that it was down the street from a junkyard.
Right. Details.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So we fast forwarded, you've moved past circle prospecting and for sale by owners probably. Have you ever gotten into the paid lead space?
I did paid leads for about 5 minutes, and that was again, because the return on investment is not there. Like, when you know where those leads are coming from, like, I would have to know from the organization, how do they vet those leads out? Because if they are just clickbait leads,
Right.
then I want to pay a real low amount if I even want them, because it essentially is getting a phone number, like when I was circle prospecting.
Right.
And I could just circle prospect.
Right.
I could just go to the white pages and get phone numbers. So it never made sense to me why I would pay that so much money for this many leads that turn into this many sales, maybe. So I just never really did it. I did in the beginning with, I never paid for Zillow because I never aligned with why Zillow was in existence, and I viewed it as a major competition for my role, my job, and so I would never contribute in that way. I did do Realtor.com leads for, like I said, 5 minutes.
All right, so now we are basically, you said you're database driven, right? You go with your SOI. So what does that look like? How do you nurture your database?
So in the MREA book, you see it looks like a bullseye, and in the center of it is this core advocates group, and I really focus on the core advocates. I was fortunate enough to be able to join a networking group about 10 years ago, and it's a networking group that the premise is there's only one person per profession in the group.
Like a BNI?
It is a BNI group, yep.
Okay. Yep.
And so BNI just stands for Business Networking International, and the realtor position is a coveted position in any one of those groups because they can feed so many other people in the organization. And at the same time, it has to be the right group who can then also feed the realtor.
Right.
And I chose to go into a group that was very business to business minded or focused, and it really has worked out well for me. So most people do not stay in one of those organizations for longer than a year or two, maybe 3 years, and it's been 10 years, and the core group within that has been there about the same amount of time. And so we've really forged these mutual beneficial relationships in passing business, and that had started the core group that I focus on.
Okay.
And so a significant amount of my referrals do come from that core group, not only BNI, because now that core group has expanded,
Sure.
but that's where I focus the majority of my time.
Okay, and what does it mean to focus your time on them? How does that look?
So for those that are in that organization, I meet with them on a weekly basis. I became the president of the group, so I can communicate with them more often. It's not that I couldn't before, but my role allows me to communicate with them more often.
Mm-hmm.
I also reach out to the next tier, the larger tier beyond that maybe has been a past client within the last 3 years, and just check in with them and see how I can help, especially the people within the last year. They are still having their housewarming parties, and they're still having conversations with people at holiday times and whatnot. And I find that that's how I can keep that momentum going a lot more.
So mostly just through checking in, emails, texts, calls.
It's mostly calls, because when the way I got into the business, we didn't really have text messaging, although it existed. It wasn't really a thing.
Right.
We had email and phone calls, and there is so much more that you can learn and work with in a phone call conversation.
Right.
So like even just answering the phone as much as possible. Obviously, I don't answer the phone when I'm with a client,
Right.
but if I'm at home or I'm doing something else and the phone rings, I will answer it if at all possible, because through a text message or emails, communication can just be misinterpreted or lost.
Right. Right.
And
Okay.
it doesn't give me the opportunity. So for example, because I was so focused in the beginning of my career on keeping the conversation going,
Right.
it is hard to tell that in a text message.
Right.
You can't necessarily keep that conversation going.
Okay.
And you can when you're actually having a conversation.
Okay. So that's actually good to hear. I think a lot of people will try to do anything to avoid having to make the phone calls. And I think it's because we're kind of getting away from being a phone call society, and we feel like people don't want to hear from us, right? That feels like a burden to them. But you're saying that you don't feel that way. Like you've done this enough. Like you think your clients are happy to hear from you, eager to hear from you. You've never felt that.
Oh, I have felt that, oh, this is awkward. And I've just stepped into something I really want to get out of. But ultimately, because I've been in the business for this length of time and seen the ebb and flow and the technology changes and the societal changes, that in my experience, I would say in the last like 3 years, my experience has been that people want to actually have the connection.
Mhm.
And if you're not calling to, like, I generally don't call them and use that script that says, who do you know that's looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate in the next 7 to 10 days? I generally don't ask that.
Right.
I just check in and then ask specific questions around that I know will lead me into a real estate conversation.
Okay. What kind of questions are those? Help us out.
Well, like for example, COVID has actually helped those types of conversations differently. So for example, I called all my people from last year, and especially the ones that I knew only put 5% down. I knew they were in types of industry fields that might not have been something that had a position consistently through COVID and so forth, and wanted to offer up those opportunities and to help out. But then also just seeing what's new with them. Like some of them are having babies and they bought small houses, and you know what I mean? Like stuff that I wouldn't necessarily know otherwise.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else that you employ outside of the phone calls that you find helpful, nurturing? Do you do like the pop-bys or gifts or anything like that? Do events?
I have not as yet, although part of my goal going into 2021 is to do a tiered system of kind of like a rewards program. I know many people have heard of other teams doing that kind of thing. I have not in the past. I didn't, because in the beginning of my business practice, I felt very much like, when you go to see your lawyer or your dentist, dentist is a bad example. They give you a toothbrush, but you know what I mean? Like you just don't, other professions don't do those types of things. You go to them because they give you great service.
Right.
And so I dabbled in it, but I just never got into it. And the majority of my clients, that's not why they are working with me.
Right.
And so.
Yeah, it is interesting. I feel like nobody runs businesses like realtors run businesses. Right.
Right.
I've thought before, when I feel like I don't want to make the call, I'm like, nobody's calling me. My painter's not, and it's just like, we don't see the modeling out there. It's its very own business and runs differently than anything else, right?
Yes.
So yes, if you're looking to like see how other businesses that are referral based do it, it's not usually like this. So.
Right. Yeah.
Although I will find sometimes, like I got a call the other day from a guy that does carpet renewal,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just like, hey, like, what do you think I can do? He actually asked me for help. Like, this is a weird business. How can I help realtors? And it's funny because he put me in the position of like wanting to help, like, I was happy to. I was like, oh, would do this and this and this and maybe offer a discount, like a package, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now I do. Now he is top of mind because he
Mhm.
called me, right?
Right.
So I think it's funny. We were all just so afraid of the phone, but I really do think you got it down that that's the best thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that, my clients are fabulous sources of referrals. And yet, maybe it's because I happened to choose my BNI group that was very business to business focused, is that by tapping into each one of their businesses, because they are all salespeople, the average seller or average client, depending on what kind of industry they may be in, they know about 250 people.
Right.
But the average business owner knows, upwards of 1,000 people.
Right,
So
right.
tapping into that resource and what can I do for them has been amazing. And it's just different. It's just different than what.
So did you expand from that? I mean, it sounds like you got this one, like you said, your core. That one BNI group has been your bread and butter, it sounds like. Do you do other networks too to kind of branch off on that, or do you really just kind of keep to the heart of it?
Well, my focus is I want mutually beneficial relationships. I don't want to go to a Chamber of Commerce, let's say Irondequoit Chamber of Commerce. I don't want to go to one of those where there's multiple realtors in there, or there's multiple carpet cleaners or whatever, because it's then just very transactional and everybody's there to see if they can get a piece of business.
Right.
I want to work with people where there's that relationship so we can be bought into each other's businesses to a high degree, so that they don't think of somebody else or I don't think of someone else.
Right.
I have my handful of loan officers that I work with, and I have strategically chosen them because there are banks that my clients need to work with for various reasons that other banks don't work with, that won't fit for them. But also, I'm not going to work with just anybody, say at Premium or GRB or whatever. I'm going to work with somebody who has a like business model. Like how do they get business?
Right.
And is there an opportunity for us to work together? So I do a lot of that stuff outside of BNI, but it's all about being strategically minded. For these people can help my clients at a high level, and can I help their business at a high level, and are they willing to help my business at a high level?
Right. Now, help your business at a high level from a referral standpoint, or just service your client? Both.
Oh, it's really, so yes, they have to be able to service the client at a high level. That is like table stakes.
Right.
But what really gets them to stay on the list is the referral relationship. I don't care if a loan officer can give me flyers or things like that. And a lot of loan officers, I have noticed over the years, look at that as, well, I'm giving you this, you don't have to pay for that in marketing. But when you look at the cost of paying for the marketing versus the return on that investment, there is no return on investment really on a marketing flyer. Right. There is a huge return on investment in a referral relationship, obviously.
Yeah.
So when I interview loan officers, or if I have an opening in my portfolio and I interview them, it's not, I don't care about those things.
Are you transparent with them? Like, this is what I'm looking for.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I need to know that we're going to be sending each other business, and this isn't a one-way street.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. And I feel, and I started that many years ago. There's this gentleman that's no longer in the industry in Rochester. He built his practice large enough that he could move to Florida, and he's definitely living a life worth living as he designed it. So, but in speaking with him in the very beginning, we definitely wanted to work together as long as it made sense. Right. And we knew the expectations right at the beginning. And it was such a refreshing conversation because it was the first one I had around this type of concept, instead of what happens traditionally at like an office meeting. A loan officer presents and the purpose is to just get on as many agents list as possible. Right, and that was not his approach, and I was in 100% alignment with that.
Okay, that's great, because you know what, we don't talk about that sort of thing very much, and it's true. You see an attorney or whatever, and they're just trying to get as much business as possible. But you do think sometimes, like if you're doing so much business, there's not a lot of chance that you're going to refer me any business.
Right. Yes,
Right?
absolutely. And I guess to sum it up is like my business goes deep, not wide. Like
Right.
that's the type of relationship I want to have with my people.
Yeah, and I can see that actually from the conversation. So let's talk about what your day looks like. Are you a structured person? Do we time block? How does a typical day in the life of Laura look?
Yeah, I'm super structured in the morning, and then the afternoon, I'm much more comfortable with it being like all over the place.
Okay.
And I say all over the place because it's dependent on my client's needs. Right now, I'm working with a firefighter in the city of Rochester, and they work odd hours.
Right.
And so I'm going to make a modification for him and his wife, and that isn't always the case. So
Right.
in the morning, I'm pretty structured. I'm taking care of the things that fuel the business, like lead generation,
Yep.
And fires. If there are any fires, all of that stuff happens before noon. And
Okay.
then in the afternoon is when I will typically go on appointments, showings, things like that.
Okay.
Have my business conversations, follow-ups.
Yep. And so that morning lead gen time, it sounds like you're either going to your BNI meeting and kind of having connections and coffees maybe with those people, and then making phone calls with other people in your sphere. Is that pretty much the bulk of what that lead gen time looks like, or
Yeah,
is there anything else?
yeah, it's really mostly phone calls. It's mostly phone calls because I also noticed, like, I have had an ebb and flow in the way in which I communicate with people over the 15 years. And there was a period of time where I was just like everyone else and just, I would rather send a text message or whatever because I was more removed. And I just did not like it because it kept the ball rolling in that way and made me more and more and more disconnected.
Okay.
And I just didn't love it. I just want to hit everything head on at this point and get after it, I guess.
Yeah, be purposeful. Do you employ do you have where you try to connect with your every client 4 times a year? I mean, is there that type of system or?
Not yet. So because I have so many people now in the database, my main focus is that core group. And like I said, so in the BNI group, there's only 14 people,
Right.
and yet who they've introduced me to, or I've added to the bigger core group, you know, I've got probably about 150 people kind of in there. So that's my bread and butter, and that's who I focus most on.
Okay.
And then, you know, the bigger group will get maybe an email here or there. But
Right.
part of that tiered system that I'm looking to establish will help me make sure that 4 times a year, the different events, the bigger stuff, everybody can be a part of. That's just something that's lacking right now for me.
Yeah, just like we all have room to grow in.
That's
For sure, right?
right.
Well,
That's
and
right.
it's funny because you're clearly a very systemized person, right? You don't do anything kind of willy-nilly. You
Right.
try
No.
it, and if it works, you stay with it, and if it doesn't, then you move on, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you don't even go into things, it sounds like, unless you've actually thought fairly well through it. So that's interesting because I don't know that everybody's like that as
Yeah. Most people are not. Most people are not, especially if they gravitate towards sales. It's usually unusual for someone to be in sales and have that extra analytical side to them.
Yeah, which is probably that's one of your gifts, right? That's one of the things that makes you you. Speaking of that, your unique proposition, like what do you feel is what makes you, when you're talking to your clients, like what you can add to the table, your special gifts. I mean, I can see from a process standpoint for sure.
Yeah, I think, that probably is one of the top unique pieces, is that I am very process oriented, but I find that because I'm process oriented, for those that are that way, they really love it, but also those people who are not that way and they're trying to sell their home, they need some corralling
Right.
in how to get to the finish line with the least amount of stress and so forth. And on a buyer's side, I have found that the education that I bring to the table is huge for them.
Okay.
So for example, I've covered for agents over the years, and when I cover for them and it's a buyer showing and we go through a buyer showing, I'm just more detailed
Okay.
than I hear that they experience in terms of looking at the home and understanding the home before they decide to put pen to paper. And then I want to avoid them regretting their decision.
Okay.
And so in doing that, I educate them a lot on homes and neighborhoods and, you know, what you're allowed to educate them on.
Yes,
Like,
yeah.
for example, like this neighborhood has a higher percentage of rentals to owner occupants or vice versa, or, you know, stuff like that.
Right. Factual things.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, this is all great. What do you think, if you were starting right now in the business, would you do anything differently? What would you do if you had to start right now and build the business from scratch like you did, but not 15 years ago today? Is there anything you would do differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think today there is more opportunity than there was 15 years ago because of team structures.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way the business was back then, it was still pretty basic in that if you want to be a realtor, here's the path. You're going to become a realtor and you're going to sell real estate, working with buyers and sellers, and you're going to have to navigate 100% of all those things that are needed to get to the closing table. And there isn't much sense in having other people take over parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that mindset is so different. And there is value in having a specialist that takes on this or that or whatnot, because you cannot be everything to every client.
Yeah.
And there are so many specialties within our industry, you know, not just buyers and sellers, but farms, that you brought that up earlier, farms and rentals and land and, you know, rural property versus urban properties, things
Right.
like that. There's so many specialties that people can do that if I knew at the time truly what my strengths were and where the market is missing the mark and I could utilize those strengths, I would go in that direction. So I probably would have joined a team actually at one point.
Okay. Do you have any leverage now? Do you use any help at all as far as your marketing pieces or data entry or anything, or are you by yourself?
Yeah, so right now I am by myself. I have explored. I had an assistant for a short period of time about a year or so ago, and then evolved into having a virtual assistant and so forth. And there are pros and cons to all of that. But my goal is to have a team that is that is highly supported by a logistics team. So at the moment, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for individuals that that their strengths, the things that they feel fulfilled with, are in the logistics side of any kind of business, and build that structure and then bring on agents that will be specialists.
Okay, so you do have a vision, obviously, for building a team, getting out of production potentially, eventually, or?
Eventually, I mean, eventually I want to, so, you know, our business model from a market center standpoint, you know, eventually I want to be able to support my agents because I have a coaching background and other leadership backgrounds. I would love nothing more than to be able to coach those agents that have a shared vision, that are in alignment with my vision and so forth, but to help coach them so that they can have tremendous success in their area of expertise.
Okay. It's funny, we never even got to the fact that you were
okay.
there's so much we didn't get to from what you've done, but you were a TL and you've coached. So what do you think, because you've actually gotten to see a lot of agents kind of probably rise and fall, what do you think the biggest mistakes agents are making? The ones that aren't making it, like what would you kind of pinpoint that?
I think that so my years of coaching, for the most part, is really where I'm coming from with this statement, which is that the vast majority that get into the business do not fully understand what they're getting into, what it means to be a business owner, how to build. You're basically a startup company. you've aligned yourself with Keller Williams, which is the smartest move in the business, and yet you are a startup company. You
Right.
make all of the decisions and you are all of the worker for the most part.
Yep.
And yes, there are opportunities. What did you say?
Nobody's handing you anything, right?
Right. And to really check in with yourself to make sure that you are committed at a high level to that. Right. Because the vast majority of the population is not committed at a high level to being a startup company to eventually evolve into a sustainable company.
Right.
And with so many businesses, like just outside of real estate anyway, the percentages of businesses that fail because there's that lack of understanding around their industry, lack of research ahead of time, lack of action, all kinds of different reasons that businesses fail, but the percentages that fail are quite high. And it's no different in real estate.
Right.
The vast majority will not be in production after 3 years that get their real estate license. So I think that that's the biggest mistake, is really not understanding fully what it will take to be successful. And I think, unfortunately, we as agents who've been in the business make the mistake of not sharing the reality along with the potential.
Right. Okay. And it's interesting because one of the things I've always struggled with from just the nature of how real estate businesses run is that brokerages benefit from lots of agents.
Yes, I know. You're right.
So there's this, like we're always trying to grow agents, although there is only so much business to go around, and so there's that benefit of having lots and lots of agents, but they can't all necessarily make it either, and is it in the best interest to tell them all of those things? I remember when I was looking to get into the business, that was the first question I asked. I'm like, tell me what everybody won't tell me. Like, tell me what I need to know. Like, what's terrible about the business? And I remember the first person I talked to, you might have been the second person I talked to, was, and he was just like, people treat you like junk, He's like, they'll lie to you. They don't respect your time. They will like run up to you after you've shown them 32 houses, so excited, and tell you how they bought a house over the weekend, And that was important stuff to know, because there's a lot of like, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking things in real estate, as wonderful as it is,
Right. Yes. There are, yeah. And I guess I mean, even so in doing that, in interviewing, when I started the coaching program, it was important because we were successful if each of us were successful.
Right.
So my success was dependent on whether they were successful, which is it's an awesome business model.
Right.
But in doing that, I needed to make sure that they were committed, and it was more about the actions. Like, I could teach somebody to protect themselves and their contract so that we could avoid as much as possible somebody coming up to them after the weekend and saying that they just bought a house and stuff like that. But it really was the commitment to the behind the scenes, because the behind the scenes is what actually runs the business and makes you successful. It's not your ability to be charismatic and convert a client at a house or to sell their house. It's all the behind the scenes stuff that makes them consistently successful, and not just have a win here or there. And, and I just think that not knowing that, looking at the Instagram version of real estate and not the actual life behind the lens is a mistake that a lot of people make.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think we do enough as a industry, and I guess as a company, to get people ready to run their businesses? Are there gaps there that you think we could work on?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are always gaps because the industry is a fluid body. It's constantly moving, it's evolving. So there's always going to be gaps in different ways. To your point, I think that, if the goal of individuals in a leadership team are to bring in as many people as possible, that can affect other elements of the organization, and making sure that there is that communication at what point is it a worse thing just to only focus in this narrow way, if that
Right,
makes
right.
sense, the way
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
explaining.
Absolutely.
So I do think that there are opportunities for us to, as an industry, improve and raise the bar on talent
Right.
in coming into the industry. And I think that all of us would be served at a higher level if we could raise that bar and potentially even change some parts of models that are numbers driven, like agent count driven, if that
Sure.
makes sense.
No, absolutely. Coming from another industry, photography, which had a low barrier to entry and a lot of competition, people who didn't understand or value pricing, I
Mhm.
get it.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
do. So
Yeah.
back to agents, since this is supposed to be an inspirational kind of morning, like kind of final thoughts as far as, in sending inspiration to new agents out there. Anything that you would do to encourage them or tell them, like, you know what, these are the things. Oh, we've got an agent who built a great business here in Rochester and then moved to Florida. Did you buy his business, Golden Handoff? Did you buy the business of the agent that moved to Florida?
Oh, no, that was actually a loan officer.
I thought it was a loan officer, yes.
Yeah. 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 No, that
um,
would be amazing.
yeah, that would be amazing. And I know people do that
Yeah.
sometimes, right? They
Mhm.
kind of like get into an older business and then when they leave, they start to get a referral fee for a couple of years and do
Mhm.
that sort of thing. But yeah, so yeah, any kind of like words of advice for the new agents out there, some inspiration for them.
I would say, ultimately, if they are not in a coaching relationship, that they should be in a coaching relationship. One of the biggest game changer, I shouldn't say a coaching relationship, an amazing coaching relationship. Because one of the biggest game changers that I have seen firsthand for myself, for other people around the country, for people in this marketplace,
Right.
like some of our Keller Williams top agents, they were and still are in fabulous coaching relationships, and some of them that are on that list had a coaching relationship that, being younger in the business, was more affordable of an option for them, that helped set them on a path
Right.
of high level success. It was
Right.
one of the contributing factors. And the vast majority of agents do not have that. And they're floundering around
Right.
because that's just what the industry's like. It's like you're being thrown to the wolves.
Right.
And
Right.
so if you can establish that, I know it costs something, and yet the return on that investment is the highest return on investment. And the last thing, I guess, would be to start thinking like a business owner. And you've heard me reference return on investment a lot in
Right.
this little half hour or whatnot. That's how business owners think. They think about the return on investment and how far that can go. And in a coaching relationship, there are things that I do today that are a direct result of coaching relationships that I had 10 years ago.
Sure.
And so that can go so much further
Okay.
than other things. So
Do you equate coaching with mentoring, or are they separate
I
things?
don't.
No, you want somebody who's like being paid to help you get to where you're going.
Well, I mean, whether it's paid or not,
Right.
the difference between a coach and a mentor to me is that the coach is focused. If it's a high level coach, the coach is focusing their growth on how to be a better coach, how to be a better person in kind of partnership, not business partnership, but in partnership with your goal,
Okay.
and how to take you to the next level. In my mind, the vast majority of the mentors that I've met and attempted to have as my own,
Right.
it is much more of a how-to. Like, watch me do this and so forth. And it is a little bit closer to teaching and instruction than it has to do with coaching and strategic conversations and
Okay.
helping somebody get to that next level and being that person to help that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other tools that you kind of support out there? Anything from an accounting program to anything like that that you feel are beneficial? that a lot of
Yeah,
people?
I have QuickBooks. I also make sure that I have experts in other fields. Like I'm not an expert in accounting, so yes, I have QuickBooks because it allows for my CPA, who is an expert,
Right.
to do things better.
Right.
And so I do leave those things to experts.
Okay.
From a tracking standpoint, as good as Command is getting, I still use CTE to track because I think it's just a little bit more robust
Right.
for what my business looks like.
That's
Or
the
someone,
CRM program.
no, it's a tracking system for like pipeline.
Oh, okay.
And so I would say for a newer agent, it isn't necessary to have something that is that robust, and then ends up just being an expense
Right.
at that point. But I use systems like that too because it's a larger practice, so I need to make sure I'm focusing on all those moving parts.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a question in here from Andrea. Are you an S Corp, LLC, or do you still run as a sole proprietor?
I'm in S Corp.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what do you think is the value of that over staying a sole proprietor? Is it protection? Is it financial?
There's a couple of things, the protection, but also you don't pay self-employment tax. You pay yourself taxes. So the first time in 15 years, I didn't have to pay taxes. I mean, I paid them, but I didn't have this lump sum to do.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay.
So those are the main benefits. And it's easier as you build out a team to have an incorporation.
Right.
As you bring on people to pay a salary and so forth, you have more options available to you.
Sure, absolutely. Ron asked about your team. So Ron, that's the future of Laura Swogger Real Estate. We're working on the team. And you're thinking in the next couple of years probably, right?
Yeah, I mean, the goal really is, I mean, I'm actively interviewing people for the logistics side of things now. So the goal is really the first of the year to be able to, assuming all goes well, really to be able to be attracting agents to that.
Okay. Yep. Wonderful. So any other questions out there, guys, for Laura before we let her go? We're almost at our hour. We try to keep it between 45 minutes and an hour to respect people's time. So,
awesome.
yeah. And you guys are welcome to unmute yourself if you want to at this point.
I'll unmute myself. Hi, Laura. It's Andrea.
Hi. How are you?
Good, good. I always love hearing you. You're always so calm and collected. It's like so unlike me. So unlike me. So you said that you still do coaching. Is that on the side? And that, is that something, I know you're not a MAPS coach, but is that the model that you follow? Like MREA, you follow that when you coach?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's funny. Why have you gotten out of coaching?
So the reason is that I just wanted to, I had started the coaching program initially and was afforded the opportunity to become a team leader, and then went back into coaching, and ultimately staying in coaching the way that it was designed. It is a great design for a market center, and yet it didn't allow me to also have as much of a personal connection to my real estate practice.
Right.
And so I really had to make a decision because I was one person, and I was really passionate about both of them. And I had started the coaching program at a time when my business was just getting to that peak of building a team and so forth. Right. And so that goal that I had taken a backseat to it.
Okay.
And so I just decided, and we had brought in a mentor layer to it and so forth. And so I just decided that I wanted to focus the majority on building my real estate practice so that I could look to be fulfilled in that capacity. And then at some point I may, once that is completely leveraged, then I may be able to have some of my time back that I can then bring back into the coaching element of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful. All right. Well, that's all the questions I have. So if nobody else has any questions, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening.
Oh, no, it's wonderful. I tell you what, and it is funny because, again, you are the most systemized person I think last week was Danielle Johnson, who I think is like, so between the two of you, it's so great. Two super successful people, just completely different approaches, right? And so I think that's one of the best things about these shows is that there's more than one way. There's something that's consistent about everything, which is that people are focusing on their database, they're doing the work, they're making connections, but we don't have to do it all the same way.
Right.
So it's wonderful. Anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.